Tanya Howard, and I'm a senior researcher based here at the law school. They host me here. I do research on environmental and natural resource policy and law, and particularly focused around how the community interacts with the legal framework. So that's my background. And I thought I'd talk today about how law is one element of the decision-making framework that we have around environmental and natural resource issues. And I actually don't have a law degree, I don't have a law background, but I've had a lot of experience with the law through working in policy and politics and community activism as well. So I came to look at the law in my research as part of a sort of a picture, that we have rules that are made, but then how they put into practice and how do people interact with that framework. So for me, law is one component, policy, politics and community. And the things that I'm really interested in are kind of the big questions that we tend to maybe overlook when we're thinking about these frameworks, which is really about where the power lies in the system. So whose voices are heard, who gets to speak on all these issues that are really important to us, and whose interests in the end are served by the decisions that are made. So that's sort of, those questions to me really get to the heart of what justice is. And so thinking about environmental justice and thinking about social justice. So, is it just about humans and, our rights, or is it also about non-human life? Is it about, First Nations rights? Is it a whole range of different things that we don't always think about when we're thinking about what the law says, So the reason I came, I suppose, on this journey is that when I was in my 20s, I was involved in a big environmental protest up in the Northern Territory at the Jabiluka mine site. So there was in Kakadu National Park, there was a proposed uranium mine, and that was a legal proposal. So the whole legal framework was supporting this uranium development. And the traditional owners, basically decided that they didn't actually feel like their voice had been adequately heard or respected in the decision. And so they said, no, okay, we're not going to go ahead. We want to stop this development. And so they reached out to, legal bodies around the world, United Nations and World Heritage, and they also reached out to, the whole Australian community and the international community to say, we think this is an unjust and, not right development. And so people went up there onto country, invited by the Mirarr people, stayed there, got in the way, spent 3 to 6 months sort of living on country and actually getting physically on the road, getting, onto the site in front of bulldozers and machinery to stop work. And that's a photo of me at the time. I was about 24 on one side of the fence. And one thing that I started to learn was that, we were getting in the way, and so we were breaking the law. We were doing the wrong thing by the legal framework. So we had police there, we had people getting arrested, and we needed to understand the legal framework, because there's nothing worse than, turning up thinking that you're doing the right thing and that you've got the law behind you because, you think you're doing the right thing, but actually all of the laws are saying, no, you're wrong, and you're going to go possibly to jail for what you're doing. So that was my first experience of what is, I had never really understood before, civil disobedience, which has got a huge, long history. And, you'd be probably familiar with these, icons in our sort of, social history of the world. People like Gandhi, who, basically started to break the law deliberately and in a peaceful way, but with the very clear message that they felt that the law that was there was unjust. It was the wrong law and it needed to be challenged. And they didn't have resources necessarily to mount a Supreme Court case. They couldn't hire great barristers, etc. So one way that people can interact with the legal framework is to, make a peaceful protest to make a point. And we've seen a lot of that recently. There's Martin Luther King here. You can see with his, he was arrested many, many times, as was Gandhi. The message of peaceful resistance, and we can see that now that that's still happening in the world. It's one of the great tools that people have to draw attention to the law and when they think that it's not fair. And, this is carrying on in Australia at the moment up at the Adani mine site. This was only a couple of weeks ago. The traditional owners there, once again, much like Jabiluka, the legal framework has all the way through. They've tried to, use the law as it stands to engage with the law, to mount challenges, to ask questions, to sort of push back, and unfortunately it hasn't been successful. And the proposal goes ahead and the project starts to dig into the ground and to actually start looking like this Adani mine's going to happen. And so the traditional owners have taken the step to get in the way and actually call for a civil disobedience response. And so closing the road, challenging the trucks as they come in, and I think really making a clear connection as well between First Nations rights and how they're not really well represented in our legal framework, and environmental justice too. So saying this isn't just for it's for all the people in the world, as well as the First Nations people and all the non-human life that's there that might be implicated and affected. So for me, that's a great example of how it's not an easy path at all, and it's almost everything is against you to take on a challenge like this. But what you can see is that there's a heritage behind this. It's about taking the law and saying, well, again, whose voices are being heard when these decisions are being made, and even when the law is being created, it doesn't come from some higher power. It comes from humans, sitting around, getting qualified, getting their experience, having the language that they need to then shape a piece of legislation. And then it gets put through the courts and it gets challenged and decisions are made and they become precedents. And so we have a body of work that starts to build up that says, yes, we think this is, legal, and then this is definitely not. And we have to always be just asking ourselves, well, whose interests are being served here? And particularly with environmental issues now and, with climate change, we're facing the impacts for young people, the future. We have to be very careful to pick this apart and say, who's actually being advantaged? Who's getting the benefit from the decisions that are being made now? So why should people study law? I think it's essential, because if you want to have a really strong role in being able to shape the future that you are going to live in, then and also support the people who might be taking a really hard, strong stand and putting themselves out there, then we need people with, good ideas around justice who want to be heard and who've got the skills and the language to say what they want to say. So that's sort of my background, my story, and I hope that, lots of you think about what you could do with your legal skills going forward.